Hello and welcome to my channel. I want to try and make a crocus and a snowdrop using the resin dip technique. I'm going to use some floristry wire. It's a plastic coated wire. I'm using a paper stump, but you just need something that is round that you can slip the wire off and that you'll be able to wrap it around. I've got mica powder and an acrylic nail powder in white, and I'm going to use some UV resin. I'll start by wrapping the middle of my wire around the stump to form a loop, and then I will twist the two lengths together to secure that. Just a couple of twists. Now I can take that off, and there's my loop. Now I'm going to snug that right up against the stump and twist one of the lengths around and wrap it around my loop and bring it all the way round. Now I can take that off and I will twist towards the length that I have just done, just to secure that. That gives me my two loops. Now I'll wrap the longest length around. I'll bring that in front of the loop and then wrap it round behind the loop and bring it away from where I'm wrapping. Now I can take that smallest length and twist that around the long bit that's left. I'll just keep winding it around until I've only got one strand or stem left. Then I can take the loop off and I'll twist it around so that all of the loops will lay flat, and I will have 3 petals. Now they're a little bit round. I want to make them slightly more oval for a snowdrop petal. So I'm just going to use a pair of round nose pliers, but you can use anything to pull them out. And I'm just pulling on the middle end of the petal. So I'm grabbing the middle of the petal, holding it, and then pulling the pliers away to elongate the petals. And you can see they become slightly more oval. And then once I've done all 3, I'm just pinching the end here just to try and make it a little bit more oval. Now I want to bend the petals up, slightly curve them. So I'm just using my thumb to bend into the middle of the petal on each side, and it gives it a curve. And I'll do that to all of them. You want to use a wire that's quite pliable. This floristry wire is. Now I want to make some dip resin. You want to make sure that you've got a pot that's big enough for you to dip your flower in. So I'm going to mix up some resin. I'll add this white UV resin into my pot. And then I'm going to top that up with some UV resin, and I need to make sure that it will be deep enough to dip the petals all the way in so that they are completely covered. I'm going to leave some white resin in this pot. Now, in order to make a dipping resin, you need to add a drop of clear glue. People use Elmer's school glue as long as it's clear. This one I got from Hobbycraft. And when I say a drop, I mean a drop. I'm going to dip my dotting tool in there, and I've picked up 1 drop. So I'm going to add that to the resin, and then I can mix that in. You can see immediately that it's become thicker and it's slightly stringy, it's slimy. If I lift up my stick, you can see it forms strings. So I think you can see that it forms strings. It still flows, but it wants to cling to the stick, and that's exactly what we want. So now I'm going to dip my petals in. And it might take a few tries to try and coat all of them. It's better if you actually concentrate on doing one petal at a time. Unfortunately, I learnt that the hard way. So I did try and dip all of them in at the same time, and I was able to cover the petals and get them to cling. As I say, it did take a few attempts. I had to make sure that all of the wire was submerged right up to the where it's twisted together, and I was able to get them to actually coat and cling. So then I just let the worst of it drip off, and then I kept the petals moving just by twisting them. You can see a big blob I want to get off there. I don't want to scrape it against the side, that will pop the tension, the film. So now I just kept twisting it and moving that around while I moved my pot out of the way and brought my UV resin into place. I was trying to twist it, but having gloves on meant that it wasn't so easy to twist the wire. So I just kept rotating my hand around and brought the lamp in place. Now that was disastrous. I hit one of the petals with my finger of my glove and it broke the film, which is why I think it's better if you actually concentrate on just doing one petal at a time. And in future, actually, when I did make some more of these, that's what I did. So I'm just keep rotating it round until it sets enough that it stops moving. And then before it's set properly, I wanted to remove some of the film that was left on the bit that are broken. If I leave that there, I will have a very difficult time trying to coat that again. So I'm just pulling it off before it sets. I've moved it out from underneath the lamp, and you can see it's almost jelly-like. So I'm able to pull that away from the wire, and now I can just set the other two petals. And I was able to dip the other one, the remaining petal, and get that coated, and then I could give all of them a proper cure. I used a silicone tool to apply some of the white UV resin that did not have the glue in it, and I just spread that over the surface of the petals. I put it on the front and spread it around to give it an even coat, and then I cured each petal, and I did each one separately just to make sure that I could keep it flat and so I didn't have the resin pool. I coated them front and back, which evened out the colour and gave them some added strength. I now can bend them into shape. I'm just pulling the petals down and bending the stem or curving it round, because snowdrops do tend to drop. I think that looks really pretty. Here's another one I made, and I bent the petals over a lot further on this one. I found some small pieces of wire and decided to see if I can make a small one. So I'm using this stylus, and again I'm going to wrap it around in a similar way. So I start by wrapping round and twisting my wire together, but instead of taking this loop off, I'm going to bring the wire around twice, and then I'm going to wind again around, take the small piece and twist that around again, and then wrap the wire around one final time so that I form all three loops together whilst it's on the stylus. Then I can slide that off and twist them all into shape. And I'll do exactly the same as I did before and elongate the petals, and then I can curve them. Now it's ready for dipping. Because it's much smaller, I dipped all of the petals in at once, This did mean that I ended up with a big lump of the dipping resin in the middle. So I tipped it upside down and let it all run down to the bottom. And I used a stick to try and remove the worst clumps of it. It was very stringy. This is what it looks like, and you can see all of the petals are coated. So now I just need to cure it under the lamp whilst keeping it moving. As before, I added some of the white UV resin onto the backs to improve the colour, but also I was able to dome the petals, which gave me a nice rounded look to my bud. And here it is with all 3 petals done, and you can see that it does give it a nice rounded bud-like shape. So I'll just curve the stem a little bit, and now I need to make a leaf. So I'm going to use the wire in the same way, except this time I just want to make one long opening, and I don't want it to be too wide. Luckily, the leaves of snowdrops and crocuses are long blade-like, almost like grass, but slightly thicker. So I'm just going to bend this into one long blade, squeeze the end, and then twist the bottom. You don't want to make it the gap too wide. If it's too wide and too big of an opening, then you will not be able to get the film to actually form across. The surface tension's too great and it just keeps collapsing. So I don't want this to be too wide. Luckily, I am making only a very small snowdrop. So I'm trying to get the end a little bit more pointed and slightly curved a little bit at the base. I'll see if this works. I decided to use the white resin because I don't want to mix up multiple colours of dipping resin. If I use the white, I can always colour over the surface or even add coloured resin once I've got the film across. So first of all, I just dipped it in, but it was too deep for the pot. So I tried to use the stick to drag the resin up over the surface. And once I got a good blob on the bottom, I was able to drag my stick across and form a film. Sorry that was a little bit off camera, but I managed to get the film to form, and then I broke it. So I'll show you again. I put a blob on and dragged that slowly across the surface, and I was able to get the film to form. So now I tried to leave enough on there and keep it moving around and set it. Once the film was set, I use a Copic marker just to colour it green, and I coloured it on both sides. Copic markers are alcohol markers, and because it's white, you can pretty much use any colour you like. This I just found to be the most economical way. Instead of making dipping resins in lots of colours, I just used white and then added colour to it afterwards. After I coated both sides, I let it sit for a while just to let the alcohol evaporate and for it to dry. Then I put a coat of clear UV resin on each side to restore the shine and give it some added strength. I attached it to the bud just by twisting the wires together. You could use a flower tape, a green flower tape, to wind around the stem, but I like to see the gold wires. So in order to make the crocus, I needed 5 petals. I made 2 sets of 2 petals and a single petal, and I elongated each one as you see here. I wrapped them around a slightly larger object, and I just used a pen. I used my stick to help coat the petals, and then I cured them in the same way. Once they were all coated with the resin, I could form them into shape, and I pushed them together and then wound the wires together to create a 5-petaled flower. And while I couldn't bend the actual flowers themselves, I could push them all up into an upright cup. Similarly to the leaf, I used a Copic marker to colour them in on the front and the back of the petals. And then I added some UV resin on top. I pushed the petals gently together so that they touched as much as I could in the middle. And I already had some UV resin mixed with some gold glitter. I used this in my bee trinket dish. So I put a blob in the middle just to form a platform because I want to put some stamens, and I cured that. I have a nice centre to my flower, and it's helped to bind the petals together. So now I'm going to take another piece of wire and I'm just going to straighten this because it's got a few kinks in it. I'm just pressing against my thumb and the stylus that I used earlier and dragging the wire through to straighten it. And now I'm going to cut off a few pieces. I just used scissors. And I'll twist these together. Then I'll fold that in half to give me a bunch of 4 strands. I can spread them out, and then I'll just use some snips to trim them down to create some stamens for the centre of the flower. I've turned on my lamp and I've got it on its side. Now I'm using my stick to apply blobs of the gold glitter UV resin onto the end. And I'm curing it as I go. Having the lamp there means that it sets pretty quickly so it doesn't have a chance to run off. Because it was so small, I actually found it easier to hold with some tweezers. Then I could put the blob on and keep it moving underneath the lamp until it had cured. I want to attach the centre piece now, so I'm just folding up the flower and putting it in a cup just so that it's supported, and I want to try and get this as level as possible. So I'm putting a blob of the resin in there, and I really need the cup to be tilted so that it sits level while I attach the stamens. So I put a decent blob in there, and now I need to not only hold the stamens in place but angle the lamp as well. So I just propped the cup up a little bit. I didn't have a mould that I could put it in that would be supportive and the wire would be out of the way, so this was the easiest way. So I'm holding the stamens and I'm putting the end into the resin and trying desperately to hold it still while the lamp does its work. But as you can see, I am pretty jittery. I'm not left-handed and I don't work terribly well with my left hand. But by some miracle I managed to get it to attach. And this is what it looks like so far. I'm really happy with it. It's so pretty and I'm loving the colour contrast between the pinky and the gold. So now I need to make a leaf. The same kind of shape but slightly bigger. So again I'll just twist my wire into shape. And try to form a film on the resin. Unfortunately, no matter how many times I tried to get the film to stick, it just would not work. And so in the end I resorted to cheating. I lay it down on top of a mould and filled just inside. I haven't stuck this down, it is literally just laying on the mould. I was able to just put a very thin layer in and made sure that it touched the sides. Once it was set, I peeled it off of the mould. And I had one area of overspill which I trimmed off with some scissors. And there was a little area just near the twist where I hadn't quite got the resin, so I just filled that in and spread a little bit over the back. Then I cured that. I used the same Copic marker to colour the front and the back of the leaf. I set it aside to dry for a little bit. And then I used some UV resin to give it a coat on the front and the back. I twisted the wires of the leaves onto the stems, and then I've just put them in a pot. I'm really happy with them. They're so pretty and I can't wait to make some more. Please give me a thumbs up and a comment if you've liked this video, and if you haven't subscribed, please do, and come back and see what I'm making next time. Thanks. Bye.